All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to be breaking down a business model that is, quite frankly, hiding in plain sight in almost every town and city across the country. Think about this for a second. We are consumer culture, and Americans just have way too much stuff. When our garages overflow with, broken treadmills and those fondue sets we used exactly one time back in 2012, we don't actually get rid of them. Instead, people are consistently willing to pay anywhere from $100 to $300 a month just to store their excess belongings somewhere that isn't their house. So today, we're unpacking the cash flow secrets of the self-storage industry. This is literally the business that makes money from people's junk.
And I want to hit you with this staggering figure right out of the gate. $44 billion. That's not a typo. This isn't just some quirky side hustle or a tiny niche real estate play. The self-storage industry is a massive $44 billion market. It's this foundational piece of the modern American economy that most of us literally drive past every single day without giving it a second thought. But behind those metal roll-up doors, well, there's a highly optimized economic engine at work.
And this number right here is exactly why it's such an economic engine. 92. The average self-storage facility in this country runs at a 92% occupancy rate. That means they are practically full at all times. So when you combine a $44 billion market with a 92% utilization rate, you're looking at what just might be the smartest, most reliable cash flow business you've probably never seriously considered.
Section 1, the business of junk. Let's look at the day-to-day mechanics.
Think about what happens if you start a traditional business. You're immediately dealing with a massive headache of moving parts, right? You've got constant inventory management, complex manufacturing, supply chain nightmares, and you absolutely have to manage a large roster of employees. But self-storage? The overhead is incredibly minimal. For most small facilities, you don't hold inventory, you don't produce anything, and honestly, you often don't even need on-site employees. You essentially just need a piece of land, some metal units, and a reliable security gate. At the end of the day, you're just renting out a metal box.
And here is the absolute best part. Most tenants stay for over a year. The churn is remarkably low. People spend an exhausting weekend moving all their heavy stuff in, and then, well, human nature takes over. They don't want to deal with the hassle of moving it all over again. So they just leave it there and happily pay you every single month. It creates this incredibly reliable, recurring monthly revenue stream that requires almost zero ongoing sales effort to maintain once that unit is actually filled.
Section 2, the numbers breakdown. Let's dive into the investor math.
Let's actually run the numbers to see how this builds out in a typical scenario for a small 50-unit facility. Buying a used setup like this might run you anywhere from $150,000 to $400,000. Now, looking at the revenue side, each of those units brings in about $80 to $200 a month. Because we know the average occupancy sits right around 92%, your monthly total revenue is going to comfortably land somewhere between $3,600 and $9,200. But here is the real kicker. Your land taxes, basic maintenance, and insurance, they're only going to run you about $1,500 to $3,000 a month. That leaves you with a really strong monthly net profit between roughly $2,100 and $6,200. Even a modest used facility yields incredibly strong profit margins simply because those operating expenses are just so low.
Section 3, the value add strategy. How to modernize for pure profit.
Okay, so this is where the real money is made. You're looking for existing mom-and-pop facilities that suffer from severely outdated management. You know the kind. The current owner is probably keeping track of rent using a physical paper ledger. They absolutely do not have an online payment system. They probably expect a physical check in the mail every month. And the security? It's practically non-existent. We're talking maybe a rusty padlock on a chain-link fence. This is a business stuck in the past, and it's practically begging for modernization.
So what do you do once you buy it? You execute 3 really straightforward steps to drag the whole operation into the 21st century. Step 1, you add an automated gate code system so you can track exactly who comes and goes, and more importantly, easily lock out tenants who haven't paid. Step 2, you implement a modern online payment portal. Make it super easy for people to just set up auto pay with their credit cards. And step 3, you install high-definition security cameras. Implementing these 3 simple tech upgrades literally transforms the business operations overnight.
$1,500. When you add real security and basic convenience, the market responds. Those 3 simple steps we just talked about can easily increase your facility's occupancy rate by 10%. And because the facility is now significantly nicer and way more secure, you can completely justify raising your rates by 20%. On that standard 50-unit facility we looked at earlier, that optimization generates an extra $1,500 or more in pure profit every single month.
Section 4. The legal landmine. Let's pivot and talk asset protection.
Now we have to address the ultimate question in the storage business. What happens when a tenant inevitably stops paying their monthly bill? If you own an apartment building, you go through a formal eviction process. But in storage, their junk is still sitting right there in your metal box, taking up valuable space you could be renting to a paying customer. And here's the catch. Unlike other businesses, you absolutely cannot just open the door and toss a non-paying customer stuff out onto the street.
The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is a legal term known as conversion. Conversion is simply the unlawful taking of someone else's property. Self-storage facilities have a highly unique legal exposure because of what are known as lien laws. You see, every single state has highly specific self-storage lien statutes that dictate exactly how you have to handle abandoned property, and you absolutely must follow them to the letter.
Because if you don't follow the law, if you get impatient and commit conversion by throwing their stuff away or selling it improperly, this is your reality. You can be sued for the full replacement value of the contents of that unit. A tenant could suddenly claim they had a priceless antique collection or $10,000 worth of electronics in there. Believe me, you do not want to be on the receiving end of a lawsuit for full replacement value just because you got fed up with a non-paying tenant.
To avoid that absolute nightmare, there is a strict, mandatory legal playbook you have to execute before you can ever reclaim your unit. Step 1, you must send formal, legally compliant notices to the tenant. Step 2, you have to wait the required statutory period dictated by your specific state's laws. You literally have to give them time to make good on their debt. And step 3, in many states, you can't just decide to keep their stuff. You actually must publicly auction the contents. You absolutely cannot skip these steps. So let's summarize your defensive measures with this protection playbook. First, always operate your facility under an LLC to protect your personal assets. Second, utilize a rigorous, state-compliant lien process for every single non-payment issue, no exceptions. And third, maintain robust contents insurance to protect against the unexpected. The legal framework here is very clear, but I'll repeat it just to be safe. There are zero shortcuts when it comes to handling other people's property. Which really brings us to our core takeaway for this explainer today. Self-storage is undeniably boring. But man, boring is wildly profitable. While renting out metal boxes completely lacks the glamour of launching some flashy tech startup or opening a trendy downtown restaurant, the incredibly strong margins, the remarkably low customer churn, and the straightforward scalability, they are completely undeniable. It's a fantastic model if you just take the time to do your homework. And hey, to help you out with that homework, we've actually linked a comprehensive state-by-state lien law guide right down in the description so you can learn the rules of the game for your specific area. I want to leave you with one final, provocative question to think about today. What is the storage vacancy rate right there in your specific town? Do some digging this week. Call around to a few local facilities and see if they even have units available. Because that single number, your local vacancy rate, is the ultimate indicator that will tell you if this incredibly profitable blueprint can actually work for you right in your own backyard.
Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. Let's dive right into things today because we've got a seriously fascinating topic that bridges everyday real estate with the future of transportation. We're looking at the EV charging station business, the ultimate blueprint. Right now, if you just take a look around our cities, we are seeing this massive, unprecedented mismatch out on the roads. Millions of brand new electric vehicles are hitting the streets, but there is a glaring lack of places for people to actually, charge them. It's like a giant game of musical chairs, but for cars. So today, we're going to look at exactly how everyday people are stepping up to fill that massive gap. 10%. Think about that for a second. EV adoption just hit a huge milestone. 10% of all new U.S. car sales are now electric. That is a staggering wave of vehicles. And what that means is the demand for charging infrastructure is absolutely skyrocketing right now. The public grids out there, they simply cannot keep up with the cars rolling off the dealership lots. And honestly, that bottleneck creates an incredibly unique opportunity for decentralized everyday solutions. Okay, let's dive into this because here is where it gets really fascinating. $4,200. That is the return one guy saw in his very first year after installing a simple charger right in his residential driveway. He didn't own a huge parking garage or a mall, literally just his driveway. His initial investment was only $2,000, and the window for this business, it's wide open. The data strongly suggests this is just getting started. So let's look at how this works. Section 1, the passive income playbook. This whole trending strategy basically revolves around the Level 2 EV charger. Simply put, this is hardware you install on a property and list on a network. Think apps like ChargePoint or EVEV to earn passive income every single time a vehicle plugs in. That's the basic playbook right there. You simply buy the equipment, throw it in your residential driveway, and let those major public networks bring the paying customers directly to you. They find your charger on their smartphone app, pull up, plug in, and pay you automatically. The absolute best part of the whole shebang, you don't even need a fancy commercial property to get started. All right, let's dig into the math. Section 2, breaking down the numbers. Now, what's really interesting here is the very real math behind those high returns, so we can see how this business actually functions month to month. Your upfront cost for the Level 2 charger itself, plus getting a certified electrician out there, generally run between $1,000 and $3,500. But the ongoing operational math, well, that's where the magic happens. Your monthly electricity overhead is roughly $50 to $150, and you're making your profit on the revenue per kilowatt hour markup, which typically sits around 15 to 30 cents. So the absolutely crucial question is, how do those operating margins play out in reality once the hardware is up and running? Well, when you run those exact margins, you get $100 to $350. This is the true, realistic monthly net profit for a standard residential driveway setup. And I actually love this number because it brings the initial hype down to earth. It gives us a very realistic, steady passive income baseline for a single home unit. No, it's not going to make you a millionaire overnight, but it's fantastic side hustle money for a previously unused slab of concrete, easily paying off your initial investment over time. Which brings us to the next phase, Section 3, scaling to commercial locations. And this brilliantly illustrates why you eventually scale. Once you understand the residential model, you quickly realize it's really just a proof of concept. While residential gross revenue pretty much tops out around $500 a month, commercial placements can bring in well over $2,000 every single month. We're talking apartment complexes, shopping centers, busy office parks. That is where the heavy daily traffic is, and quite frankly, that's where the real money is hiding. So, how do you actually get your hardware into those prime spots? Well, it's a very methodical 3-step commercial pitch. Step 1, approach the property owner. Step 2, offer to install and maintain the charger entirely at your own expense. And step 3, you split the charging revenue 50-50 with them. The brilliance of this pitch is the mutual benefit. The property owner gets this highly desired modern amenity that attracts premium tenants and customers, and you secure highly profitable locations with absolutely zero real estate acquisition costs. It's a win-win. By successfully scaling this exact 50-50 split model to just 5 commercial locations, your recurring monthly revenue hits this really impressive target of $2,500 or more per month. At that point, you're essentially building a portfolio of cash-flowing utility assets entirely on other people's property. How cool is that? Okay, let's shift gears and get serious for a second. Section 4, protecting your new assets. Because we are dealing with heavily regulated, high-voltage electrical infrastructure here, there are absolute non-negotiables you must follow to protect yourself and ensure you actually keep what you earn. First, you absolutely need an LLC setup to formally separate your personal assets from the business. Second, you must pull official electrical permits for every single installation, no exceptions. Third, depending on your area, your utility company may require interconnection agreements to put this on their grid. And finally, product liability insurance. Listen, doing the installation right definitely costs more upfront, but doing it wrong, that could completely ruin your business and your personal finances. Power surges can and do damage vehicles, and without proper coverage, you are liable. This actually happens in the real world. If your unpermitted charger causes a power surge that suddenly fries a customer's $60,000 electric vehicle, you are entirely on the hook for that bill. That specific, very real danger is exactly why skipping proper liability coverage and cutting corners on permitted installations is literally never an option for a smart business owner. So the bottom line is this. EV charging is the only business where demand is absolutely guaranteed to grow over the next decade. When you look at the raw data of car sales, the demand for EV infrastructure isn't a question of if, it's happening. The cars are already being sold today. The real question here is whether you're going to be the one owning that critical infrastructure and collecting the cash when the time comes. Which brings us to our final thought. Would you put one in your driveway? Seriously, is there an unused piece of concrete outside your house right now that could be safely generating steady passive income? Take a look out the window, think about it, and see if this blueprint makes sense for you.
Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we are exploring what might just be one of the most unconventional, yet literally game-changing areas in real estate. You know, while everybody else is obsessing over flashy high-rise apartments or flipping those single-family homes, there's this completely different asset class just quietly generating massive returns in the background. We are talking about low-income housing that yields shockingly high-income returns. I mean, we're talking 20 to 40%. Seriously, that is the potential cash-on-cash return we're looking at here. Just to put that into perspective for a second, those numbers absolutely obliterate your typical real estate investments. In fact, mobile home parks boast some of the highest risk-adjusted returns of any real estate asset class out there, period. Now, I know it sounds almost too good to be true, right? But the math is real, and the heavy hitters, well, they already know it.
Actually, if you need proof that this isn't just some fringe, flash-in-the-pan strategy, look no further than Warren Buffett. His company, Clayton Homes, has been quietly scooping up mobile home parks and manufacturing the homes themselves for years now. And let's be honest, when the smartest investors in America are loading up on an asset, there's clearly a massive information gap that the rest of us need to close. So let's find out exactly what Warren Buffett knows that the rest of the market is just now waking up to.
Part 1. The brilliant business model.
Now, before we start crunching the financial projections, we first really need to understand exactly why this highly lucrative model works. What's really interesting about this setup is the stark contrast between it and traditional real estate. Think about traditional property for a second. You own the building, the roof, the plumbing, and you're constantly on the hook for heavy, expensive interior maintenance. Every single time a toilet breaks or a water heater floods at 2 a.m., your phone rings, right? But with the mobile home park model, it's a completely different ballgame. The tenant owns the physical home. You, as the investor, simply own the dirt underneath it. That means absolutely zero interior maintenance for you. None. You're basically in the parking lot business, but, for houses.
And because you own that land, those tenants pay you what's called lot rent every single month, just for the right to park their home on your dirt. Depending on the market and what kind of amenities the park has, that rent typically ranges from $300 to $800 a month per pad. That is pure, unadulterated revenue generated just from leasing the ground.
But guys, here is the absolute genius of this whole system. You might be wondering, why don't tenants just pack up and leave if you raise the rent or if they find a cheaper park down the road? Well, it all comes down to one massive, literal roadblock. It costs between $5,000 and $15,000 just to physically move a mobile home to a new location. Think about that for a second. Because those moving costs are so prohibitively high, tenants rarely, if ever, leave. For you as an investor, this grants you apartment-like cash flow, but with extremely low turnover. Your revenue stream becomes incredibly sticky.
Part 2. Breaking down the numbers.
Okay, let's move past the theory, shift gears with some energy here, and actually look at the concrete mathematical proof of a turnkey operation. Let's make this abstract finance super accessible. So, imagine you buy a small 20-pad turnkey park. The purchase price for something like that might run you anywhere from $300,000 to $800,000. Now, if your monthly lot rent per pad is between $300 and $800, those 20 pads are kicking off a monthly gross revenue of $6,000 to $16,000. Then, you just subtract your monthly expenses, stuff like property taxes, insurance, basic landscaping, maybe some management fees, which usually run roughly $2,500 to $5,000. Look at that bottom line. You are left with a monthly net profit of $3,500 to $11,000. It is a highly efficient machine flowing straight from gross revenue down to a seriously strong monthly net profit.
And all of that cash flow, it translates into a truly beautiful metric, an 8 to 14% cap rate. Simply put, a cap rate is basically your expected annual return if you bought the property entirely in cash. While shiny new apartment buildings might be trading at tiny 4 or 5% cap rates right now, mobile home parks are routinely hitting that 8 to 14% mark. That right there is what makes this underlying math so exceptionally attractive to investors who just know where to look.
Part 3. The value add strategy. So the crucial point is figuring out how to actively increase those returns. You don't just buy a park and sit on your hands. The real strategy is targeting parks owned by mom-and-pop retirees who maybe haven't raised rents since, say, 5 or 10 years, which leaves those rents way below current market value. The math behind this is profoundly simple. If you implement a modest $50 a month increase on a 20-pad park, that immediately puts $1,000 more per month straight into your pocket. Boom! That's $12,000 a year in additional pure profit derived simply by bringing the lot rent up to the standard market rate. It perfectly illustrates the immediate financial impact of gradually raising lot rents. And this creates a very clear three-step value-add progression. Step 1, you buy that park with a below-market lot rent. Step 2, you gradually, and fairly of course, raise the lot rent to match the actual market. But Step 3 is where you really build a community and secure your investment long-term. You take some of that new cash flow and you reinvest it into infrastructure improvements. You pave those potholed roads, put up crisp new signage, maybe install some bright, safe lighting. By doing this, you're not just making the place look nicer, you are significantly increasing both tenant satisfaction and the overall valuation of your property.
Part 4. The legal minefield. Now, every wildly lucrative investment has a catch, right? And in the world of mobile home park investing, the dragon you have to slay is extreme legal complexity. As amazing as this asset class is, it is definitely not without its hurdles. First up, you have the Fair Housing Act, meaning you've got to navigate incredibly strict rules regarding tenant selection to ensure absolutely no discrimination. Then, you've got state landlord-tenant laws. Interestingly enough, many states actually have specific statutes just for mobile home parks that offer eviction protections that are far stronger than standard rental laws. Next, if you accept Section 8 vouchers, you have to maintain absolute strict compliance with HUD guidelines. And finally, local zoning. Let's be real, some city councils aren't exactly huge fans of mobile home parks, and they're actively pushing to rezone these areas for commercial redevelopment. So consider this your warning. This is absolutely not a set-it-and-forget-it business. You have to be proactive. To actually survive that legal minefield, you need to build a defensive arsenal for asset protection. First, you absolutely must form an LLC to separate your personal assets from the business. Second, you need a specialized real estate attorney on retainer. And no, don't just wait until a massive problem arises to find one. Have that legal counsel actively review all of your tenant lease agreements to ensure they are completely ironclad. And perhaps most importantly, you must secure specific liability insurance that explicitly covers tenant disputes. Doing this right and actually protecting those massive returns we talked about earlier requires checking every single one of these boxes. No shortcuts.
So what does this all mean? We've seen the incredible dynamic tension at play here throughout this explainer. On one hand, you have one of the absolute highest cash flow real estate plays in America, right? Sticky tenants, a brilliant business model, zero interior maintenance. But on the other hand, it demands serious, hands-on, navigational skill through a very complex web of legal and zoning regulations. The financial returns definitely justify the effort, but only if you are willing to put in the work to do it right. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Assessing your own risk tolerance and your willingness to learn, would you ever invest in a mobile home park? Think about it. It might just change the way you look at real estate forever.
Welcome to today's explainer. We're looking at an investment opportunity today that, well, let's be honest, it isn't exactly glamorous. It actually flies completely under the radar for most people. But here's the secret. It's a surprisingly passive, highly profitable asset. I'm talking about the self-serve car wash. It's the leaner, meaner version of the classic car wash business model. And by the time we wrap this up, you'll see exactly why it generates such an absolutely incredible return on every dollar you invest. All right, let's dive right into part 1, the ultimate passive business, featuring 0 employees and maximum efficiency. Now, to really wrap our heads around this opportunity, we need to look at what sets this ultra-lean model apart. If you've ever looked into buying one of those massive full-service car washes, you know the drill. It feels a lot like stressful stock picking. There are constantly moving parts, sky-high overheads, massive staffing headaches, just daily grinding management. But the self-serve wash? That's your relaxed, hands-off index fund of the car wash industry. You basically set the whole thing up, take a step back, and let it steadily work for you without demanding your constant attention. So what does this actually look like on the ground? Well, a standard self-serve wash is a facility with anywhere from 4 to 8 open bays. Customers literally just drive up, park, pop in their payment, and wash their own car. It's brilliant. You provide the pressure wands and the soap, and they provide all the labor. Because of this setup, you have absolutely 0 employees. None. 0 payroll to manage. The machines are doing all the heavy lifting. Honestly, your main physical obligation is just showing up maybe once a week for basic maintenance. And hey, if you want to bump up your revenue later on, some locations even add automatic in-bay washes as a premium upsell. It's literally the picture of efficiency. Okay, moving on to part 2, breaking down the numbers, or the financial reality of a typical 4-bay setup. I know we're all really here for the data, right? So let's walk through the math together. Let's say you purchase an existing 4-bay setup. Your initial cost is going to sit somewhere between $80,000 and $200,000. Now look at that revenue line. Each individual bay brings in around $750 to $1,500 every single month. Multiply that out, and for a 4-bay setup, you're looking at a total monthly revenue of $3,000 to $6,000. But wait, here's where that index fund magic we talked about really shines. Your monthly expenses are only $800 to $1,500 because there's no massive payroll eating into your margins, right? So after expenses, you're walking away with a monthly net profit of $2,200 to $4,500. Which brings us to the ultimate punchline of this whole operation. When you actually run those numbers, you are looking at an incredibly powerful 25 to 40% annual return on investment. Let me just emphasize that. In the world of physical, cash-flowing small business acquisitions, finding a relatively passive asset that's throwing off a 40% annual ROI, that is extraordinary. So let's talk strategy in part 3, the card payment multiplier, and why upgrading from coins to cards is a total game changer. If you visit most self-serve car washes today, you're going to notice a glaring flaw pretty quickly. They are stuck in the past. They're relying entirely on coins. Just think about it from the customer's point of view for a second. Their wash is totally limited by whatever sticky quarters they can scrounge up from under their floor mats or the bottom of a cup holder. In this day and age, relying solely on pocket change means you are leaving a massive amount of money on the table. But the growth hack here is incredibly simple, and the data backs it up. Just remove the pocket change limitation. Studies of these facilities show that the very moment you add card readers, your average ticket size instantly jumps by 30 to 50%. No way, right? But it's true. Customers just tap their card, and because they aren't frantically racing a quarter-fed timer anymore, they relax, they take their time, they splurge on the premium soap, they add the clear coat wax, and they just spend significantly more per visit. Now I hear you. You're probably thinking, okay, but card readers sound expensive to install. And yeah, sure, it does require a bit of capital up front. Upgrading your systems will run you about $2,000 to $5,000 per bay. But remember that massive 30 to 50% bump in ticket size? Because of that, this upgrade literally pays for itself in just 3 to 6 months. It's a total no-brainer. You put the capital in, and within half a year, it's pure multiplied profit from there on out. All right, part 4, mitigating your risks and bulletproofing your investment. Now, I want to keep this explainer totally grounded in reality. No business is completely perfect. And if we're going to be smart investors, we have to talk about the headaches. Obviously, just like a full-service wash, you've got your standard slip and fall risks. But the self-serve model introduces one very unique threat, and that's equipment liability. You're basically handing high-powered machinery over to the general public. If a pressure wand malfunctions, blows a seal, and strips the paint right off some guy's classic Mustang, well, you are on the hook for that damage. Because of that, the crucial move here is setting up what I like to call your 3 lines of defense. You need to bulletproof your wealth. First up, you absolutely must have product liability insurance specifically for your equipment. Second, you need a really robust general liability insurance policy to cover the physical premises. And third, do not, under any circumstances, run this as a sole proprietorship. Actually, scratch that. Just don't do it for any business. You must form an LLC to insulate your personal assets from the business's liabilities. That right there is your non-negotiable legal playbook. But beyond the legal structure, we've got a fantastic pro tip straight from the source material for you. Just have a sign made with this exact phrase, use at your own risk. Hang it up so it's highly visible right at the entrance of every single bay. Now look, this doesn't magically eliminate all your liability, don't get me wrong, but legal precedent shows it significantly reduces your liability in most states. It is just such an incredibly cheap, easy way to add an extra layer of armor to your whole operation. So let's tie all of this together. The self-serve car washes is simply the leanest version of an already lean business model. When you put it side by side with full-service washes, you're looking at much lower startup costs, absolutely zero labor headaches to manage, and especially when you implement that card payment upgrade, massive profitability potential. Honestly, if you're deciding to jump into the car wash game, the data makes it pretty clear. This is absolutely the best place to start. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on as we close out today's explainer. When you look at the whole landscape of passive, local, cash-flowing businesses, it usually comes down to 2 heavyweights. So based on everything we've covered today, would you rather own a car wash or a laundromat?
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into what just might be the most obscure yet incredibly lucrative passive business model out there. And it's literally hiding right in plain sight along almost every highway you drive on. We're talking about the billboard economy. The whole concept really boils down to one simple, powerful idea: own the sign and collect the rent.
Just imagine this for a second. An asset pulling in up to $4,000 a month. Now, we aren't talking about a massive commercial apartment complex. This is from a single location with 50,000 daily passing cars. And the absolute best part? You're generating this revenue without ever touching a physical product or dealing with some complex, messy supply chain. It just sits there, towering over the traffic, working for you 24/7.
So when you look at that kind of hands-off return, it naturally makes you wonder, right? Could owning a billboard actually be the single most profitable business per hour of your time? I mean, think about it. Most high-yield investments require massive time commitments or huge operational overhead. But this model, it suggests something entirely different.
Section 1. The ultimate passive business.
Let's unpack how this whole thing actually operates out in the wild. You've got this massive outdoor advertising industry. We're talking about a $9 billion market here in the US alone. And unsurprisingly, it's heavily dominated by a couple of corporate giants, usually referred to as the Big Two, Lamar and Outfront. But here's where it gets interesting for us. There is a highly profitable, almost completely overlooked niche for independent owners in secondary and tertiary markets. These are those slightly smaller locations the giants might pass right over, but where local traffic is still incredibly valuable.
And the daily mechanics are just brilliantly low maintenance. Once the physical structure is actually up, what are you doing day to day? Well, the advertiser sends over the artwork or the digital file. Then a display company handles the upload to the board. And your main job? You simply collect the check. That's the effortless cycle. You aren't fielding angry customer service calls at midnight. You're just providing the digital real estate.
Moving on to Section 2. Billboard Economics Explained.
Let's break down the hard numbers so you can really see the massive upgrade path here. A traditional static billboard is going to cost you anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 to build, and that usually brings in a respectable $500 to $2,000 a month in ad revenue. But then you look at the digital side. Yes, it's a way higher upfront build cost, $50,000 to $150,000. However, a digital board lets you rotate 6 to 8 different ads. So even when you factor in monthly expenses like the ground lease, electricity, and maintenance, which max out around $1,500, that rotation feature skyrockets your potential monthly net profit up to an astonishing $14,500.
All right, Section 3, your step-by-step strategy. So, how does an independent investor actually execute this and get a piece of the action? Well, your playbook looks roughly like this. First off, you don't even necessarily need to buy the land. You find a property owner near a busy intersection or highway on-ramp, and you offer them $200 to $500 a month to lease the ground rights. Second, you build a standard 14 by 48 foot static sign. Third, you lease out that ad space. And finally, step 4, you take the profits from that static sign and eventually use them to upgrade to digital, completely multiplying your revenue.
But who's actually writing those checks? For that crucial step of finding reliable advertisers, you really want to target local businesses that have a very high customer lifetime value. Think about who really has the budget and the desperate need for constant local visibility. You're looking at car dealerships, personal injury attorneys, busy local restaurants. You can easily charge these high-value targets anywhere from $750 to $1,500 a month for a standard static ad.
And here's why this specific asset class is practically legendary among the folks who know about it. If you stick to this exact local leasing strategy with a static sign, your payback period is aggressively fast. We're talking typically just 12 to 24 months before you totally recoup your initial build cost and cross over into pure, unadulterated profit territory. Let me tell you, in the world of hard assets, a 1 to 2 year payback period is incredibly rare.
Which brings us to Section 4. The regulatory moat.
Okay, before you rush out to buy steel and start pouring concrete, we need a quick reality check. Billboards are quite possibly the single most regulated business we are covering today. They are heavily restricted by federal laws like the Highway Beautification Act, plus an absolute labyrinth of local city and county sign ordinances. In fact, in a lot of areas, you flat out cannot build new billboards at all. But here's the fascinating twist. This intense regulation ironically creates an environment where legally existing signs are artificially scarce, and as we know, scarcity makes them highly, highly valuable.
Because the rules are so notoriously strict, you absolutely have to follow an asset protection checklist to navigate the legal minefield. First, form an LLC. Second, you must hire a local zoning attorney to verify your specific site.
Third, secure a Department of Transportation permit for anything visible from a highway. And finally, make sure your ground lease is reviewed by actual legal counsel. Seriously, if you skip this and miss just one tiny zoning check, you could easily build a $50,000 sign that the city turns around and legally orders you to tear down. At your own expense? Yikes. And this brings us to what is arguably the most crucial strategic insight from our source material today. The regulation is both the barrier and the moat. This frustrating, seemingly endless red tape, it's exactly what protects you. Once you successfully jump through all those hoops and your sign is legally established, that exact same red tape acts as an ironclad competitive moat. Nobody else can just swoop in and easily build a competing sign right next to yours. The barrier to entry literally becomes your ultimate job security.
Now, if you're the kind of person who really likes to get into the weeds and see what this friction looks like in real life, you don't have to guess. The source material for today's explainer actually links directly to a real DOT permit application guide. You can check the description to see exactly what kind of bureaucracy you'd be dealing with.
So we've walked through the mechanics of it all. You've seen the massive profit margins, especially when you make that leap to digital. You understand the highly passive nature of the maintenance once it's up and running. And of course, you're fully aware of the intense regulatory hurdles you've got to clear to secure that valuable piece of sky. So taking all this in, I want to leave you with one final question. Knowing the steep risks and the incredible rewards, would you ever consider owning a billboard?
Look, I get it. The second you hear the words passive income, right? Red flags immediately go up. And honestly, they absolutely should. We've all been pitched enough scammy buzzwords and overpriced courses to last a lifetime. But today, in this explainer, we're doing something different. We're going to look at a very real, tangible counterexample. We are breaking down the mechanics of the humble vending machine. Seriously, it's kind of the ultimate low-barrier business. Literally a $500 startup that, if you execute it right, practically prints money. Now, I want to hit you with some hard numbers right out of the gate to prove it. 47 days. That is exactly how long it took for one single $500 used vending machine to completely pay for itself. Not a year, not 6 months, 47 days. It's just a crazy fast return on investment, and it totally shatters that whole myth that you need massive upfront cash to build a sustainable, cash-flowing asset. So let's jump right into Section 1, Location is Everything. The real secret to vending.
Okay, let's dive into this. To actually make this work, you have to completely shift your mindset away from the hardware. Here is the golden rule of this entire model. The business is not about the machine. It's about the location. I mean, you could own the absolute shiniest, most high-tech machine on the planet. Apple Pay, fancy touchscreens, the whole shebang. But if it's just sitting in your garage, it's making you $0, right? Take a look at a recent 90-day test. The exact same machine, stocked with the exact same snacks, was placed in 2 different spots. Spot A made $200 a month, spot B, $1,200. Literally, the only difference was the foot traffic. That's the whole game right there.
Moving on to Section 2, the vending machine math, breaking down the numbers.
Let's look at the cold, hard math of a single machine so you can see exactly how the cash flows. First up, your upfront cost. Grabbing a solid used machine will run you anywhere from $500 to $2,000. Now for the day-to-day. Your product cost, buying wholesale snacks and drinks, is usually about 50 to 75 cents an item. But the magic is, your average sale price is $1.50 or $2. That is a fantastic markup. Put that machine in a high-traffic spot, think auto repair shops, big apartment complexes, or busy laundromats, and your monthly revenue should sit around $400 to $800. Subtract the snacks and a tiny bit for electricity, and you're netting $200 to $500 a month in pure profit from just one machine.
Now, take a second and scale that vision up in your head. If one machine nets you roughly $400 a month, what happens when you have 5 of them? Suddenly, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,500 a month. And this is highly reliable, semi-passive income. I say semi-passive because, well, it's not totally hands-off, but we're talking about popping by your locations maybe once a week just to restock. For the time you actually put in, the return is absolutely incredible.
Which brings us to Section 3, rookie mistakes to avoid. Don't kill your profits.
Before you run out and start pitching locations, we gotta talk survival. Because beginners jump into this every single day and just nuke their margins by making 2 massive errors. Mistake number 1, terrible capital allocation. Buying a brand new machine is a total trap. A shiny new one might set you back $4,000, whereas a solid refurbished one is maybe $800. And guess what? It does the exact same job. It holds the chips, takes the cash, and drops the snack. Dropping $4,000 on new equipment completely wrecks your ROI timeline. Honestly, you could have used that cash to buy 5 refurbished machines instead.
And this perfectly highlights mistake number 2, stocking the wrong stuff. You can't just fill a machine with whatever snacks you personally like. Your inventory absolutely has to match the people walking by it. If your machine is at a gym, you better have protein bars and hydration drinks in there. If it's a corporate office, people want that 3 p.m. pick-me-up, so energy drinks and salty chips are going to fly off the shelves. And an apartment complex, you want to mix, but definitely lean into those late-night indulgent cravings. Knowing exactly who is hitting that button is just as crucial as the location itself.
All right, Section 4, protecting your assets, the ultimate legal shield.
Okay, so making the money and protecting those margins is great, but shielding that money from disaster? That's the real trick. We need to talk about the physical liability here because the stakes are high. Think about it. Vending machines are heavy, electrical appliances operating in public spaces. Stuff happens. What if someone kicks the machine and the glass shatters on them? What if a kid tries to climb it and the whole thing tips over? Or what if a wire frays and someone gets a nasty electric shock? If you're running this business under your own name without legal cover, one freak accident lawsuit could literally wipe out your personal savings. They could come after your car, they could come after your house. It is simply not worth the risk.
But don't stress, because avoiding that nightmare is super simple and incredibly cheap. It's a quick 2-step process to put up an iron wall around your personal assets. Step 1, form an LLC, a limited liability company. Depending on your state, that's going to run you anywhere from $50 to maybe $300. Step 2, grab a $1 million general liability insurance policy. That's only going to cost you about $30 to $50 a month. That's it. For less than the cost of a nice dinner out, you have totally separated your personal finances from your business liability. You are protected and you can sleep easy at night.
Finally, Section 5, minimum viable setup, getting started today.
Let's bring this all back down to earth with a rapid-fire summary. If you want to get off the sidelines and actually start this today, what do you need? Well, here is your entire minimum viable setup. You don't need a massive business loan. You don't need a warehouse. You just need 3 things. 1 used refurbished machine, 1 solid high-traffic location, and an LLC to keep your assets safe. That simple 3-part checklist is the absolute foundation for unlocking this amazing stream of semi-passive income.
So, I want to leave you with something to get those entrepreneurial gears turning. Think about your own daily routine. The places you drive to, the waiting rooms you sit in, the lobbies you walk through. Take a look around your own neighborhood. Based on everything we just broke down in this explainer, what location would you put a machine in?
Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're diving into a strategy that is literally flipping real estate investing upside down. It sounds a bit like magic, right? Generating real estate cash flow from a property you don't even own. But as we're going to see, it's really all about leverage, contracts, and some incredibly smart math.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the zero-property Airbnb concept, break down the real arbitrage math, look at the scaling strategy, navigate the legal landscape, and finally wrap up with the asset protection play. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. The zero-property Airbnb. No ownership required.
So, we're kicking things off with a concept that completely bypasses massive down payments, 30-year mortgages, and endless bank approvals. What if you could run a highly profitable Airbnb without actually holding the deed to the property? Imagine generating, say, $2,000 to $5,000 a month and doing it without needing $50,000 sitting idly in a bank account. You know, for decades, the absolute biggest barrier to entry in real estate was just capital. If you didn't have the cash, well, you couldn't play the game. But this model, it changes that entirely.
We call this rental arbitrage. It's an incredibly straightforward concept where your profit is just the simple difference between your fixed long-term rent and your dynamic short-term income. You are basically bridging a gap between 2 entirely different markets. You secure a place in the long-term rental market where prices are fixed and stable, and then you offer that exact same property in the short-term hospitality market where prices fluctuate and command a massive premium.
The whole flow is super simple. You sign a standard 12-month lease, you get explicit written consent from the landlord, and then you furnish and list the place. But getting that written permission, that is absolutely crucial. If your lease doesn't explicitly allow subletting, you're breaching your contract right out of the gate. Actually, scratch that. It's worse than a breach. It's a fast track to eviction.
I literally cannot stress this enough. Always get it in writing. That single piece of paper is the entire foundation of this business.
Trying to do this secretly behind a landlord's back? Yeah, that's not arbitrage, it's just a highly stressful game of hide and seek. But when a landlord actually signs off on it, maybe because you offer to sign a longer lease or pay a slight premium, you instantly transform a liability into a perfectly legal income-generating asset.
Moving on to Section 2, the real arbitrage math. Let's do a line-by-line breakdown.
Let's validate this concept with some hard numbers. Take the baseline for a typical 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-market city. You've got rent sitting around $1,500, a one-time furnishing hit of maybe $2,000 to $4,000. Sourced smartly from places like IKEA or Facebook Marketplace, definitely not luxury boutiques. And then standard utilities like high-speed Wi-Fi. But on the flip side, if you're running at just an 85% occupancy rate at mid-market prices, your gross revenue gets pushed up to a remarkably strong $4,000 or more.
And here is the absolute bottom line. You are looking at an estimated net profit of $700 to $2,000 every single month after absolutely all costs are paid. That is pure cash flow from a single unit you don't even own. Once you recoup that initial furnishing investment, which, usually takes just 2 to 3 months, everything else is straight margin.
All right, Section 3, the scaling strategy, building a portfolio. Listen, your first unit is really just your proof of concept. The real goal is to dial in your operations so you can easily scale. If you replicate this and scale up to just 3 units netting $1,500 each, you're looking at $4,500 a month in semi-passive income. By using automated messaging software to coordinate with your guests and cleaners, plus dynamic pricing tools, you're effectively building a decentralized boutique hotel, one leased apartment at a time, without multiplying your own workload. But you've got to be smart about where you plant your flags. The absolute secret to scaling this is geography. You really must avoid highly restrictive coastal hubs. Places like New York, LA, or San Francisco are just a no-go. Instead, you'll want to target mid-tier cities like Nashville, Phoenix, or Tampa. These markets are the absolute sweet spot. They perfectly balance strong year-round tourism and business travel with reasonable baseline rents. You need that gap between the long-term rent and the short-term revenue to be as wide as humanly possible.
Which brings us to Section 4, the legal landscape, navigating regulations.
Here's where we need to pull the rug out a bit, because cities are actively cracking down on short-term rentals, and you just cannot afford to be ignorant here. Before you sign any lease, you absolutely have to check local ordinances. Don't just assume you're legally allowed to list a property. You're probably going to need a formal business license from the city. You'll definitely have to adhere to strict occupancy limits to prevent massive parties. And a lot of jurisdictions now mandate a designated local contact person who can respond to emergencies or neighbor complaints within a set time frame.
If you violate these local laws, well, you are looking at some seriously terrifying fines. We are talking penalties of $1,000 or more per day. And no, for sure, that is not a typo. Cities are aggressively using these steep fines to discourage illegal operators and appease frustrated locals. You have to treat this like a legitimate, strictly regulated business, because if you try to fly under the radar, those financial penalties will wipe out your profits literally overnight. Finally, Section 5, the asset protection play, your defensive strategy.
Because this business carries some pretty unique liability exposures, like say a guest slipping in the shower or accidentally damaging the building. You need an ultimate defensive strategy. For roughly $100 a month, you must build these 3 layers of protection. First, an LLC to legally separate your personal savings from the business. Second, commercial general liability insurance, because explicitly, standard renters policies will drop you the second they spot an Airbnb guest. And third, an umbrella policy for $1 million to catch anything that the commercial policy might miss. I know it sounds like a lot, but this structure ensures that one bad guest won't bankrupt your personal finances.
Rental arbitrage is genuinely the lowest barrier entry into real estate cash flow. It's a brilliant way to leverage existing infrastructure. But that is only true if you recognize that your real margin of safety relies on this airtight legal framework. The flashy listing photos, yeah, they get you the bookings. But the contracts, the licenses, and the insurance, those are what actually let you keep the money you make.
So rental arbitrage clearly proves you don't need massive capital to get into real estate. You just need to know how to leverage contracts. But with cities tightening regulations every single day, is the window of opportunity for this zero property strategy slowly closing, or is it just shifting to new markets? What do you think? Drop a comment below and tell us which target market you would want to conquer first.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a business model that honestly is probably the least sexy thing you can imagine. Seriously, you probably drive past one of these every single week without even giving it a second glance. But once you actually dig into the raw data and look at the underlying economics, wow, you quickly realize it's an absolutely incredible, quiet wealth builder. We're going to break down the financials and see exactly how everyday people are setting up these completely unglamorous cash flow machines right in their own neighborhoods. So buckle up, because what we're about to uncover is going to completely change how you look at this everyday roadside staple. All right, here is our rapid-fire roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The quiet wealth builder. 2. Full service versus self-serve. 3. Breaking down the numbers. And 4. Hidden risks and liabilities. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The quiet wealth builder. Okay, let's dive into this, because we are talking about a business model that operates almost entirely under the radar of traditional investors. The data we're looking at today comes straight from a real-world analysis of a mid-size American city. And honestly, the numbers are just eye-opening. $3,200. According to the source material, that is the monthly income currently being generated by one specific operation in this mid-size city. But here's the absolute craziest part about that number. It is essentially on autopilot. We are not talking about a business where you're grinding from 9 to 5, managing a massive team, or putting out customer service fires all day long. Nope. This is passive income just flowing in day after day. So what exactly is generating this steady, hands-off pile of cash? Like, what is this best-kept wealth secret just hiding in plain sight? Think about it. Is it a laundromat? Maybe a bunch of vending machines? Real estate? Nope, no, and no. It is a self-serve car wash. And just to be super clear here, we are not talking about some high-end, full-service detail shop where a guy in a polo shirt hands you a latte while they hand polish your rims. No way. We're talking about those humble, bare-bones, self-serve bays with the coin slots and the vacuum stations out front. Section 2. Full service versus self-serve. Now, if we really want to grasp the mechanics of this business, we've got to understand the structural differences in the market. Think about the full-service car wash for a second. That model requires a staggering amount of overhead. You need a massive staff, you've got payroll taxes, HR headaches, and that automated machinery. It is incredibly complex and crazy expensive to fix. But contrast that with the self-serve model. A typical setup is just 4 to 8 bays with coin or card-operated equipment. And the beautiful part? The absolute genius of it? The customer provides the labor. They drive in, wash their own car, and drive out. The source data actually calls this the true passive play of the entire industry. So if the customer is literally doing all the hard work, you're probably wondering, well, what's your job? What do you actually do? Honestly, your operational requirements are incredibly minimal. Your daily responsibilities are basically just this: maintain the equipment, keep the soap stocked, and collect the cash. That is literally it. According to the data, some owners only need to visit their locations once a week. Some even manage to just swing by once a month. It is an incredibly light operational footprint. Section 3. Breaking down the numbers. This is where the business truly shines, and honestly, where things get really exciting. We're going to look at exactly what it costs to get in, and more importantly, what you get out of it. The most fascinating thing about this financial breakdown is just the sheer efficiency of the capital. Let's walk through these numbers. To buy a used turnkey self-serve bay, you're looking at an initial cost of somewhere between $25,000 and $100,000. Now, in an average market, a standard 4-bay setup pulls in a monthly revenue of about $3,000 to $6,000. But look at the monthly expenses. Water, electric, soap, basic maintenance, that's only going to run you about $800 to $1,500. Because that overhead is just so exceptionally low, you are left with incredibly fat margins, walking away with a monthly net profit of $2,200 to $4,500. And this brilliantly illustrates why investors absolutely love this model. When you look at the capitalization rate, or cap rate, which is basically just a fancy way of measuring your rate of return, a typical car wash sits at a staggering 15 to 25%. Just compare that to the standard cap rate you'd expect on residential real estate. It's night and day. The car wash model is practically doubling the return you'd see on a typical rental house down the street. Oh, and the good news doesn't even stop with those high returns. The source material points out another massive advantage. This asset class is historically recession resistant. Think about it. Decades of data show that people simply like having clean cars. They'll wash their vehicles in a booming economy, and they'll wash them when times are tough too. It provides this highly consistent, remarkably resilient stream of cash flow, completely regardless of what the stock market is doing on any given day. But, and this is a big but, while the business model itself is old school, modern upgrades are absolutely essential if you want to actually hit those numbers today. Relying solely on quarters? Yeah, that's a thing of the past. Today, card readers account for over 60% of transactions at self-serve washes. The source states it bluntly: coin only is dead. If you want to capture the absolute maximum revenue, you have to offer card-operated equipment. Now, let's talk about operational efficiency, because there is another massive hidden advantage detailed in the source material: 80%. By installing modern water reclamation systems, an owner can slash their monthly water bill by up to 80%. You are literally taking your single biggest utility expense and drastically shrinking it, which just drops even more of that monthly revenue straight to your bottom line. It's brilliant. Section 4, Hidden Risks and Liabilities. Time for a reality check. But before you run out and buy a car wash this afternoon, we really need to talk about reality. Because as incredible as those profit margins are, there are some serious legal and financial exposures here that we absolutely cannot ignore. $50,000. That is the potential fine you could face per violation if your car wash runoff violates EPA or local water authority standards. Just let that sink in for a second. 50 grand. One severe violation could literally wipe out an entire year's profit, or worse. Environmental liabilities are the harsh reality that most potential owners never even consider. If you aren't using a proper water reclaim system, you are highly, highly exposed. But it's not just the water. You're operating a business covered in wet, soapy concrete, which means slip and fall liability is a constant, everyday threat. You've got heavy, industrial, mechanical equipment that can easily malfunction and damage a customer's vehicle. And because you are still collecting some physical coins and cash, there's an ever-present break-in risk on your cash machines. Because of all these risks, you absolutely must execute what the source calls the asset protection play. Here is the exact step-by-step roadmap. Step 1, form an LLC to protect your personal assets. Step 2, get comprehensive general liability insurance to cover all those slips, falls, and equipment malfunctions we just talked about. And Step 3, secure an environmental compliance policy. According to our data, most car wash owners completely skip that last one. So let me give you a very direct piece of advice based on this research. Don't be most owners. Protect yourself. Now, let's say you're fully protected and you're ready to jump in. The next thing you need to know, location is everything. The ultimate actionable advice here is to target properties near existing gas stations or busy strip malls, specifically on roads that see over 15,000 cars driving by every single day. And please, do not just guess this number. You need to use a traffic counter app to verify that daily volume before you even think about putting an offer in on a location. Which leaves us with the ultimate due diligence question you have to ask yourself if you want to unlock this passive wealth secret. Go look at that location you're dreaming of right now. Ask yourself, what is the actual traffic count on your main road? Because at the end of the day, that single number tells you absolutely everything you need to know about whether this quiet wealth builder will actually work for you.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open the playbook on something that honestly is hiding right in plain sight. We're talking about one of the most surprisingly lucrative asset classes out there, the laundromat. Think about it. When the economy takes a nosedive or the market goes completely sideways, people still have to wash their clothes, right? It's just a fundamental human need. So we're going to break down the exact business of laundromats, what it really costs, the realistic returns, and the specific insider strategies that the best operators use to make it an absolute cash machine. Let's dive in.
Now check out this number right here, 95%. Laundromats actually boast a 95% success rate. I mean, that is incredibly high for literally any small business in the country. And the reason why? It's beautifully simple. This asset is fiercely recession-proof. It really doesn't matter what inflation is doing or if the broader job market is shaking up, people simply need clean clothes. That built-in everyday demand creates this massive safety net for operators, giving you real stability even when the economic climate gets completely unpredictable.
But you know, a huge reason investors are totally drawn to this space is the operational model itself. Most laundromats in America are still heavily coin-operated and, more importantly, run on what's called an owner-absentee model. Practically speaking, that means you, the owner, aren't stuck standing behind a counter for 8 hours a day. These operations largely just run themselves. You're dealing with very minimal staff, maybe just someone to wipe things down and lock the doors at night. And low overhead directly translates to maximum cash flow.
You're basically setting up a system that just hums along without eating up your daily schedule.
Okay, but hold on a second. Before you rush out and buy the nearest coin op on your block, you really need to ask yourself this. What is the single legal mistake that could completely wipe out your investment? See, in a business with a 95% success rate, the real threats usually aren't a lack of customers. They're actually hidden legal liabilities. We are definitely going to get into exactly what those landmines are and how the pros avoid them entirely in just a bit. So stick around for that.
All right, let's get right into the math. Part 1. Breaking down the numbers, the financial reality check.
So, when we actually look at the costs, buying an existing turnkey laundromat is generally going to run you somewhere between $50,000 and $300,000. Now, if you want to do a brand new build-out, that price jumps significantly. You're starting at $200,000 and easily clearing $500,000. But here is where it gets fun. The average facility is pulling in $5,000 to $15,000 in monthly revenue. After you deduct your standard expenses, which usually sit between $2,500 and $6,000, that leaves you with a monthly net profit of $2,500 to $9,000. Just let that sink in for a second. $2,500 to $9,000 straight into your pocket every single month. Those margins represent serious, consistent cash flow, especially for an absentee owner business.
And when you zoom out to look at the annual performance, the picture gets even more interesting. We are looking at a typical return on investment of 20 to 35% in the very first year. Honestly, if you've ever dabbled in traditional real estate or standard business acquisitions, you know that finding an asset class yielding a 35% ROI in year one, especially one where you aren't managing the day-to-day, is incredibly rare. It's almost unheard of.
Which brings us to our next phase, Part 2, the acquisition strategy, your cheat code.
Okay, so when it comes to actually entering this market, the strategy is loud and clear. Buy, do not build. Listen, building from scratch is notoriously painful. You're looking at a brutal 6 to 12 months timeline, you're constantly wrangling contractors, and you're navigating completely complex permits. Basically, you're just burning money for a whole year before you even wash a single shirt. Contrast that nightmare with a turnkey acquisition. Smart operators can often close a deal in just 30 days and literally start collecting revenue in week 1. That immediate cash flow makes purchasing an existing operation the vastly superior route. No contest.
Right. So once you've decided to buy an existing spot, the value-add strategy is how you transform a tired facility into a modern cash cow. It's a simple 3-step process. Step 1, you specifically look for older places that haven't been updated in a while. Step 2, you go in and add card payment systems. Because let's be honest here, almost nobody walks around with a pocket full of quarters anymore, right? And then step 3, you raise prices by 15%. Because you've just added this massive convenience of taking cards, the market usually just absorbs that price increase without blinking an eye.
And the immediate impact of that specific play, it is absolutely substantial. By making that one single upgrade, adding card readers and bumping prices up 15%, an operator can often add an extra $1,000 right to their monthly bottom line. Bam, just like that. It's a straightforward, no-nonsense modernization play that instantly boosts your monthly net profit, and you don't even have to do a massive overhaul of the whole building.
But we do need to talk about the risks. Part 3, protecting your assets, the hidden landmines. Remember that hook from earlier? Well, the first hidden trap is a massive one, ADA compliance risk. If you purchase a facility and it isn't wheelchair accessible, you are completely exposed to lawsuits. And guys, these aren't just little slap-on-the-wrist fines. They average around $50,000. Just imagine it. You acquire this great location, you perfectly optimize your machines, and then boom, you immediately get hit with a $50K penalty just because you overlooked the width of a door or the slope of a ramp. It can literally wipe out your entire first-year investment in a single afternoon.
The second major risk you've got to watch out for is fire code liability. Just think about what happens inside a commercial dryer all day long. Lint buildup. Lint is highly flammable, and in a commercial setting, it's a very serious fire hazard. If a fire breaks out in your facility and you don't have proper maintenance records to prove that those vents were regularly cleaned out, that automatically equals negligence liability. One single fire without the right paperwork shifts every ounce of the blame directly onto you, the owner. Then there is the third landmine, water damage exposure. Look, this is a business that relies on literally thousands of gallons of water pumping through aging pipes and heavy-duty washing machines every single week. If a machine springs a leak overnight and ends up flooding the property next door, guess what? That collateral damage falls squarely on your shoulders. You become financially responsible for all of that flood damage to adjacent properties. And without the right protections in place, that can be absolutely devastating to your wallet.
So, how did the smart operators shield themselves from all these disasters? Well, there is a pretty strict, non-negotiable rule for self-preservation in this industry. Get an LLC, plus general liability insurance, plus property damage insurance, absolutely no exceptions. By isolating the asset within a limited liability company and carrying robust insurance coverage, you tackle the ADA, negligence, fire, and flood risks head-on. Running this kind of business without these exact protections, it's just not an option. Don't even try it.
So when you put this whole picture together, it makes sense why this is often considered one of the closest things to a guaranteed cash flow business in America. But, and this is a big but, only if you buy smart. The margins, they're totally real. The recession resistance, it is completely proven by the data. But the ultimate takeaway for us today is that your legal exposure is only manageable if you actively plan for it ahead of time. The smartest operators aren't just good at picking locations, they're the ones who know exactly where the risks are buried.
And that brings us to the end of today's explainer. It's a seriously fascinating industry, isn't it? It pairs this incredibly high cash flow with some very high-stakes operational realities. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Given how unbelievably easy it is to overlook something as simple as a door width, how many other supposedly safe investments do you think are hiding their own $50,000 landmines?
Welcome to today's explainer. We're diving into a side hustle that honestly sounds almost too good to be true. The ATM business, the $3,000 side hustle nobody talks about. Let's just jump right into the raw data, the exact numbers, and the hidden realities behind running independent ATMs. We're going to break down the source material to see exactly how this whole thing works, what it actually costs, and we'll definitely get into the major catch that almost everyone completely ignores.
Right out of the gate, consider the sheer audacity of this claim from our source data. A 100% plus annual return. No way, right? Well, the source breaks down a scenario where an initial investment of just $3,000 in an ATM business results in a single machine generating $300 a month in surcharge revenue just 3 months later. That means the machine is literally paying for itself in under a year. And get this, according to the documentation, the owner hasn't even touched the thing since it was installed. I mean, it sounds like the absolute holy grail of passive income.
So how is that actually mathematically possible? Let's look at the mechanics of the hustle. The core concept is incredibly simple, and it really just relies on 3 basic steps. Step 1, you place a machine in a high-traffic business. Think gas stations, bars, convenience stores. Step 2, a customer withdraws cash using their debit card. And step 3, you collect the surcharge. Every single time a customer pulls out a $20 bill, they are agreeing to a fee, which is typically anywhere from $250 to $350 per transaction. And the best part? That fee doesn't go to some massive faceless bank. It goes straight to the independent owner of that specific machine, you.
But a concept is just a concept until you attach real math to it. Let's start breaking down the hard numbers so we can track exactly where every single dollar goes. Let's walk through this together. Your upfront costs aren't just the machine itself. Yes, a used ATM is going to run you between $1,500 and $3,000, and you'll pay maybe $200 to $500 for installation. But check out that third line, the cash flow. You have to actually load the machine with your own money for people to withdraw, right? So that requires tying up another $2 to $5,000 initially. But then we look at the revenue side. If you lock down a good location, the data reveals an average of 300 to 600 transactions every single month. Multiply that by your $2.50 to $3.50 surcharge, and your monthly gross revenue is sitting anywhere between $750 and $2,100. Subtract your processing fees and vault costs, which run about $100 to $300 a month, and you get to the actual bottom line.
When we map this out, it becomes super clear how this builds into pure profit. After all those operating costs are paid, a single well-placed ATM is netting between $650 on the low end and an incredibly impressive $1,800 a month on the high end. This totally confirms the initial hook, that $3,000 initial investment genuinely can yield these types of monthly returns. But of course, that's provided the machine is actually getting used. Which brings us to the absolute most important variable in this entire equation, the location strategy. You aren't going to hit 600 transactions a month by putting an ATM in some quiet office building. You have to rely on a very specific strategy. The source material highlights absolute gold mines for this business. We're talking gas stations situated right off busy highways, popular bars in college towns, and restaurants that operate strictly on a cash-only basis.
The success of this whole shebang lives or dies entirely on foot traffic and the immediate, urgent need for physical cash.
But here's the question. Why would a busy bar owner let you put your clunky machine in their premium floor space? Well, it comes down to a genius negotiation tactic. It's a comparison of incentives. Normally, a business owner loses a percentage of every single sale to high credit card processing fees. But when you pitch them, you offer to give them a cut of your ATM surcharge, usually 50 cents to $1 per transaction, just for hosting your machine. Suddenly, the psychology completely flips. It becomes a win-win. It is literally cheaper for the business owner to encourage their customers to use the ATM and pay in cash than it is to swipe a credit card. Plus, they're now actually earning a passive 50 cents or $1 on top of it. It's a remarkably compelling pitch.
Okay, now if you're sitting there thinking this sounds like a total breeze, hold on a second. It is time for the legal reality check. This is the part that practically everyone conveniently leaves out when they're talking about quote-unquote easy money. The ATM business operates under heavy, high-stakes federal regulations.
The very second you start dispensing cash for a fee, you are thrust into the intense world of federal financial oversight. You have to intimately know what FinCEN is. That's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. According to the source, ATMs are strictly regulated under the Bank Secrecy Act. Why? Well, because an ATM is a highly effective tool for money laundering. If someone uses your machine to wash dirty money and you haven't followed the rules, the federal government does not care that you just thought this was a fun little weekend side hustle. Every single ATM must be registered with this federal bureau, period.
I really want to read this exact quote directly from the source material because it grounds this whole narrative in reality. That's not a fine, that's potential criminal liability. We aren't talking about getting a parking ticket from your local municipality because you forgot to renew a business license or something. We are talking about federal investigations into money laundering. If your machine is used for illicit activity, even if you had absolutely zero idea it was happening, your ignorance is simply not a defense if you skip the compliance steps.
This is not just some optional, nice-to-have checklist. This is the non-negotiable standard for staying out of federal prison. First, you absolutely must establish an LLC for asset protection. Second, you got to register that specific machine with FinCEN. Third, you must comply with PCI security standards. That means if a customer's debit card data gets stolen by a skimmer on your machine because your software wasn't secure, you're liable. Furthermore, you have to maintain strict transaction logs, and most importantly, you are legally obligated to file suspicious activity reports, or SARs. Someone is withdrawing maximum amounts at 3 a.m. every single night. You have to report it. Miss any of these steps, and all that sweet passive income suddenly transforms into a massive legal nightmare.
So, as we synthesize everything we've explored today, the ultimate takeaway is crystal clear. The money is easy, the legal side isn't. The ATM business genuinely is one of the purest passive income plays out there. The margins are absolutely incredible, the business model is beautifully simple, and the money really is straightforward once the machine is placed. But that compliance burden, it is heavy, it is strict, and it is completely unforgiving.
I want to leave you all with this final, provocative thought straight from our source. The next time you're standing in a local convenience store, a dive bar, or maybe a cash-only diner, look at that generic ATM sitting over in the corner. Have you ever checked if it's actually FinCEN registered? Because as the data suggests, you would be genuinely surprised how many aren't, and how many people are running this side hustle completely blind to the federal risks hanging right over their heads. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep questioning the data around you.